Empty her bag. Claire Whitmore didn't argue. She simply watched as security officers tipped her handbag onto the executive conference table, scattering notebooks, lip balm, loose receipts, pens, a half-finished crossword, and a faded photograph of her parents before the silent board. She was the last employee near the chairman's office. Vice President Celeste Harrington declared, her certainty louder than the evidence. No one questioned her. No one defended the Curvy operations specialist, standing alone beneath dozens of judging eyes. Then every whisper vanished. Nicholas Devereaux entered, the billionaire owner, the impeccably composed Mafia boss. Everyone expected him to dismiss Claire without hesitation. Instead, he opened his own briefcase. The missing Devereaux family watch rested inside. Silence consumed the room. Then, before anyone could recover, Nicholas knelt beside Claire and quietly returned every scattered belonging to her bag before offering a sincere public apology.
For several long seconds, no one moved. The executives who had eagerly watched Claire's handbag, emptied across the polished conference table, suddenly found the grain of the wood fascinating. The security officers stood frozen, their professional confidence dissolving into visible discomfort. Nicolas Devereaux remained kneeling. Without the slightest trace of irritation, he picked up the first item, a blue notebook with dozens of colored tabs protruding from its pages. He brushed away an invisible speck of dust before placing it carefully into Claire's bag. Next came a calculator with worn buttons, a fountain pen repaired with clear tape, a tiny sewing kit, a folded grocery list, a reusable coffee punch card that needed only one more stamp before earning a free drink. Each ordinary object seemed painfully intimate under the eyes of the executive board. Claire wanted the floor to open beneath her. She had survived impossible project deadlines, impossible clients, and impossible department heads. Yet nothing compared to having the contents of her personal life silently catalogued by people who barely knew her name. When Nicholas finished returning the last item, he zipped the bag closed himself before standing. His voice was calm enough to silence the entire room. "Miss Whitmore." Claire finally met his eyes. "I owe you an apology." No one could remember the chairman apologizing to anyone during a board meeting. He continued without hesitation. "My watch was never in your possession. It remained in my briefcase because I placed it there before this meeting. You were subjected to an accusation that should never have occurred under my authority." His gaze shifted toward the security team. "The search should never have begun before confirming the facts." Both officers straightened instinctively. "We sincerely apologize, Miss Whitmore," one of them said immediately. The other nodded. "It was our mistake." Nicholas looked toward the executives surrounding the table. "The mistake belongs to all of us." No names. No raised voice. No public humiliation. Yet several senior executives lowered their heads as though they had personally been reprimanded. Only Celeste Harrington managed to maintain her composure, though the confident expression she had worn moments earlier had vanished. "It appeared reasonable," she said carefully. The circumstances suggested an assumption," Nicholas interrupted. His tone remained perfectly even. "Facts should always arrive before conclusions." Silence answered him. Claire tightened her grip on her handbag. "It's all right," she said quietly. Every head turned toward her. She forced a small smile. The watch was found. That's what matters. To everyone else's surprise, she truly meant it. She had learned years ago that arguing with embarrassment only made it louder. The faster everyone moved on, the sooner they would forget. Nicholas studied her expression for a moment that felt much longer than it actually was. "I appreciate your professionalism," he said. That does not lessen my responsibility." With that, he ended the meeting. No dramatic speech, no punishment, no further explanation. The executives dispersed in complete silence, carefully avoiding one another's eyes. Claire slipped out through the side door before anyone could stop her. She walked directly back to the operations department on the 18th floor, where broken schedules, delayed shipments, and impossible deadlines were far more predictable than public apologies from billionaire chairmen. By lunchtime, she had already solved a warehouse routing conflict affecting 3 regional offices. At 2 o'clock, she rebuilt a failing production schedule that had threatened a multi-million-dollar contract. At 4, she quietly corrected a budgeting error another department had overlooked for weeks. She buried herself in work with the determination of someone trying to erase the morning from memory. She told herself tomorrow would be normal. By next week, no one would even remember her name. She could not have been more wrong. Long before the workday ended, whispers had reached every department inside Blackwood International, not because someone had been accused, but because Nicola Devereaux, the famously controlled chairman who almost never admitted mistakes, had knelt on the conference room floor, packed an employee's belongings with his own hands, and apologized in front of the entire executive board. Claire wanted the incident forgotten. Unfortunately for her, the company had already decided it never would. By 8 o'clock the following morning, Claire discovered that forgetting an incident and escaping it were 2 very different things. The moment she stepped out of the elevator, conversation stopped. Not dramatically, not suspiciously. Just long enough for everyone to pretend they had been discussing quarterly reports instead of her. She sighed to herself. So much for being invisible. An analyst from finance hurried toward her with a smile so enthusiastic it bordered on alarming. "Good morning, Claire." She blinked. They had worked in the same building for nearly 4 years. He had never once remembered her name. "Morning." "I was wondering," he lowered his voice. "Do you happen to know if the chairman drinks coffee or tea?" Claire frowned. "I have absolutely no idea." "Oh." He looked genuinely disappointed before wandering away. Less than 5 minutes later, someone from Human Resources stopped by her desk. "Claire, we just wanted to check whether you're comfortable." "I am." "Do you need counseling?" "No." "A different office?" "No." "A reserved parking space?" "I take the subway." "Oh." The woman scribbled something onto her clipboard, as if our Claire had failed an inspection. Before lunch, 3 department managers invited her to meetings she had never been included in before. 2 vice presidents suddenly wanted her opinion about workflow efficiency. One executive even held the elevator door open for her. Claire stepped inside cautiously. "Are you feeling all right?" The executive laughed too loudly. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" She considered several possible answers before settling on. No reason. By noon, she had become the company's unofficial celebrity. Nobody asked about her actual work. Everybody asked about Nicholas Devereaux. What did he say after the meeting? Does he always speak that quietly? Did he remember your name before yesterday? Have you ever been inside his private office? Were you scared? Claire answered every question exactly the same way. I was busy trying not to faint. That answer spread through the company almost as quickly as the original story. Even Claire had to admit it was funny. During lunch, Owen Mercer wandered into the cafeteria carrying a tray overloaded with sandwiches. He spotted her immediately. "There you are." Claire smiled with genuine relief. Unlike everyone else, Owen looked exactly the same as he had the previous week. Relaxed, slightly untidy, entirely unconcerned with executive drama. He placed one of the sandwiches in front of her. "I brought tribute." She stared at it. "Tribute?" "Obviously." He nodded solemnly. You're the bravest person in the building. I stood there. You stood there while 20 executives collectively forgot how basic logic works. Claire laughed. I was mostly wondering whether security would return my crossword puzzle. Owen chuckled. Priorities. The crossword was nearly finished. I admire your commitment. Several employees glanced towards them. Claire noticed immediately. They're staring again. They've been staring since you walked in. I hate this. I know. She sighed. I'd really like everyone to go back to ignoring me. Owen took a thoughtful bite of his sandwich. I don't think that's happening. Unfortunately, he was right. That afternoon, Claire received invitations to networking events, leadership panels, innovation committees, and even an executive appreciation dinner she had never previously qualified to attend. She declined every single invitation. Her workload had not become lighter simply because the chairman had apologized. If anything, it had doubled. Ironically, many of the executives suddenly praising her still sent impossible operational problems to her inbox without offering additional resources. Some habits survived public embarrassment, others did not. Late that afternoon, Claire entered the copy room carrying 3 thick binders. She reached for the top shelf. Before she could stretch far enough, a junior manager rushed forward. "Allow me!" He nearly dropped the entire stack trying to impress her. "I've got it," Claire said. No. He insisted on lifting everything himself. The binders slipped. Hundreds of printed pages exploded across the floor. The room fell silent. Claire looked at the scattered papers, then at the horrified manager. Then she burst into laughter. Real laughter. The kind that escaped before permission could be granted. The poor man looked mortified. "I'm so sorry. It's all right." Still laughing, she knelt to gather the pages. "You've officially made a bigger mess than security did yesterday." Even the manager laughed. Together they reorganized the documents. When Claire finally returned to her desk, she found a handwritten note waiting beside her keyboard. It contained only one sentence. "Thank you for handling yesterday with more grace than most leaders ever could." No signature. No explanation. She looked around the office. Everyone appeared busy. No one admitted writing it. For the first time since the accusation, Claire felt something shift. Not everyone had believed the rumors. Not everyone had enjoyed watching her humiliation. Some people had simply lacked the courage to speak. Perhaps yesterday had embarrassed more than one person. As she tucked the anonymous note inside her notebook, she failed to notice another pair of eyes watching from the glass-walled executive floor above. Nicholas Devereaux had been reviewing quarterly reports. Instead, he found himself watching the operations specialist laugh over a pile of scattered paperwork. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her since the apology. For reasons he couldn't yet explain, he was unexpectedly relieved. The gossip gradually faded. The work never did. 3 weeks after the incident, Blackwood International faced a logistics crisis that threatened the launch of a flagship product. A software migration had disconnected inventory data from 3 regional distribution centers. Every department blamed another. Finance blamed technology. Technology blamed logistics. Logistics insisted operations had submitted conflicting numbers. For 6 hours, executives argued, Claire spent 23 minutes reading the reports. She quietly circled one overlooked line in an old implementation document. "The warehouse codes changed," she said. Everyone looked at her. The inventory system recognizes the new codes. The transportation platform still uses the old ones. They're both accurate. They're just speaking different languages. Silence. An IT architect checked his laptop. Another manager compared the archived files. 30 seconds later, Someone whispered, "She's right." The room instantly transformed. People who had been defending themselves moments earlier began discussing solutions instead of excuses. Claire opened a spreadsheet. If we create a temporary translation table, shipments can resume today. We can finish the permanent integration over the weekend without interrupting customers. No dramatic presentation, no complicated speech, just a practical answer. The meeting ended 40 minutes early. The crisis disappeared before lunch. Everyone congratulated the department heads. Claire quietly returned to her desk. By the following Tuesday, something similar happened again. A manufacturing supplier unexpectedly announced a 6-week delay. Procurement panicked. Sales predicted millions in losses. Claire noticed that another approved supplier had unused production capacity because a different client had recently cancelled an order. She made 2 phone calls, sent 3 emails, adjusted 4 delivery schedules. The delay shrank from 6 weeks to 4 days. Once again, executives celebrated successful leadership. Once again, Claire's name barely appeared in the summary. She didn't complain. She never had. Her satisfaction came from solving problems, not collecting applause. That attitude, however, had finally attracted the attention of someone who rarely overlooked details. Nicola Devereux. Late one evening, he remained alone in his office, reviewing operational reports after most of the building had emptied. Originally, he had intended to investigate the procedures that had allowed Claire's public accusation to happen. Instead, another pattern emerged. Her name. It appeared everywhere. Not on organizational charts, not on executive announcements, not on award nominations. It appeared in footnotes, internal comments, technical recommendations, project corrections, problem resolutions. Whenever a struggling department recovered, Claire Whitmore seemed to have left behind a quiet trail of practical suggestions. He requested 5 years of archived performance reports, then 10 years. By midnight, several folders covered his desk. He discovered the same pattern repeatedly. Project rescued, recommendation implemented. Manager praised, Claire mentioned once, sometimes not at all. He leaned back in his chair. Interesting. The following morning, Claire received an unexpected calendar invitation. Executive Operations Review. Location, Chairman's boardroom. She stared at the screen. There had to be a mistake. She walked upstairs and politely asked the chairman's assistant. "I think this invitation was sent to the wrong Claire." The assistant smiled. "No, Miss Whitmore. The chairman specifically requested you." Claire blinked. "Why?" "I'm afraid he didn't say." 15 minutes later, she entered the executive boardroom carrying a notebook instead of the expensive presentation folders everyone else possessed. Several vice presidents exchanged confused glances. Celeste looked particularly displeased. Before anyone spoke, Nicholas entered. The meeting began immediately. For nearly 30 minutes, department leaders debated declining customer satisfaction scores. Charts filled the screen. Predictions contradicted one another. No consensus appeared. Finally, Nicholas closed the discussion. "Miss Whitmore." Claire looked up. "What would you do?" Every executive turned toward her. She hadn't expected to speak. She stood anyway. "I'd stop measuring complaints." Several eyebrows rose. "We already measure complaints," one vice president replied. "Exactly." Claire nodded. "Customers don't leave because they complain. They leave because they stop complaining." The room grew noticeably quieter. She continued. "We're spending as millions analyzing unhappy customers who still answer our emails." She pointed toward another chart. "The dangerous group is the silent one. They disappear without warning." No one interrupted. If we identify customers whose communication suddenly drops despite stable purchasing patterns, we'll find the people preparing to leave before they actually leave. Nicholas asked only one question. How confident are you? Claire smiled slightly. I already tested the theory using last quarter's data. Another silence. What happened? We could have predicted nearly 80% of our major client departures 3 weeks earlier. Several executives immediately requested the analysis. Claire slid printed copies across the table. She had prepared them before the meeting, just in case. As the discussion shifted toward implementation, Nicholas observed something he had missed during years of quarterly meetings. Claire never tried to sound impressive. She simply tried to be useful. There was an enormous difference. When the meeting finally ended, executives gathered around her, asking follow-up questions. For the first time in years, they weren't speaking to Claire because of the chairman's apology. They were speaking to her because she had solved another problem no one else had recognized. Watching from the head of the table, Nicholas realized the curiosity that had begun after one unfortunate accusation was quietly transforming into something far more durable. Respect. After Claire's first executive strategy meeting, invitations became routine rather than exceptional. Nobody questioned why she was there anymore. If a discussion reached a dead end, someone inevitably glanced toward the quiet woman taking notes near the end of the table. Most of the time, Claire didn't speak. She listened. When she finally did offer an opinion, it usually ended an hour-long debate in less than 5 minutes. Oddly enough, the executive who seemed happiest about that wasn't Nicholas. It was Owen Mercer. Unlike many senior managers, Owen never treated Claire as a subordinate who happened to have useful ideas. He treated her like a colleague whose perspective genuinely mattered. Claire, he would say halfway through a meeting, before we all spend another hour being confidently wrong. What do you think? The room would laugh. Claire usually rolled her eyes. You only ask me after everyone else finishes arguing. Exactly. Why? Because I enjoy efficiency. She couldn't help smiling. Their exchanges gradually became the unofficial comic relief during exhausting board meetings. One afternoon, the marketing division proudly presented an expensive campaign, predicting enormous customer engagement. The presentation lasted 43 minutes. When it ended, Owen turned toward Claire. Please tell me there's a cheaper solution. Claire scanned the slides. There is. Everyone leaned forward. We could ask our customers what they actually want. Silence. Then Owen burst into laughter. I knew inviting you was a good investment. Even Nicholas allowed the corner of his mouth to lift. The marketing vice president sighed dramatically. I spent 3 weeks preparing those slides. Claire smiled apologetically. They're beautiful slides. But they answer our questions. She folded her hands. They never answer the customers. The room erupted into amused laughter. The revised strategy later became one of the company's most successful campaigns. From then on, Owen developed a habit. Whenever meetings became unnecessarily complicated, he would theatrically clear his throat. I'd like to invoke the Claire clause. There was no such clause. Claire had checked. What exactly is the Claire clause? Another executive finally asked. Owen answered without hesitation. If Claire can explain the proposal in 2 minutes, and it still makes sense, we approve it. If she can't, we've overcomplicated it. Surprisingly, the rule worked. Meetings became shorter. Projects moved faster. Executives complained less. Claire insisted the rule was ridiculous. She secretly enjoyed it anyway. Nicholas noticed something else. Claire laughed most when Owen was in the room. Not polite laughter. Not the careful smile she offered executives. Real laughter. The kind that made her shoulders relax and her eyes brighten. He found himself noticing exactly how often it happened. Far more often than he intended. Several days later,
Owen stopped by Claire's desk, carrying 2 coffee cups. "I come bearing caffeine." She accepted one gratefully. "You continue to be my favorite executive. I'll have that engraved." Before either of them could continue, Nicholas's assistant appeared. "Mr. Mercer." Owen looked up. "Yes? The chairman needs you immediately." "Now?" "I'm afraid so." Owen sighed dramatically. "I haven't even taken one sip." Claire laughed. "Go. I'll protect your coffee. Guard it with your life." He hurried away. Claire returned to her reports. 5 minutes later, Owen reappeared. "False alarm?" Claire asked. "No." He looked puzzled. The chairman wanted to discuss next quarter's conference seating arrangements. She blinked. "Conference seating? Apparently it's urgent." He shrugged before returning to his office. Claire thought nothing of it. The pattern continued. Every time Owen and Claire began working together for more than a few minutes, another request arrived. Budget review, vendor approval, contract signature, executive consultation, regional conference call, perfectly legitimate tasks, perfectly inconvenient timing. After the 6th interruption in 2 weeks, even Owen noticed. He wandered into Claire's office, carrying a legal pad. "I've started keeping score." "Score?" He showed her the page. Number of conversations interrupted by the chairman. 6. Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" He tapped the notebook. "I've collected evidence." She shook her head. "Our chairman runs a multinational corporation." "Exactly. So, he surely has better things to do than monitor my coffee breaks." Claire considered that. That's actually a fair point. The following Monday, another executive meeting drifted into one of Owen and Claire's familiar exchanges. They were debating office renovation costs. Owen proposed adding another executive lounge. Claire looked horrified. How many lounges do executives need? You can never have enough comfortable chairs. You already have comfortable chairs. We need more comfortable chairs. The room laughed. Even Nicholas looked briefly amused. Claire turned toward him. "Mr. Devereaux?" "Yes?" "I didn't realize our chairman was competing with the strategy department." The room became suspiciously quiet. Owen lowered his head, clearly trying not to laugh. Nicholas regarded Claire with his usual composed expression. "I'm not competing with anyone." "No?" "No. You've borrowed Mr. Mercer 6 times this month." They were necessary meetings. Claire tilted her head. "All 6. "Yes, about seating charts." A few executives coughed to disguise their laughter. Nicholas remained perfectly calm. "Corporate seating influences productivity." Owen finally lost the battle. He laughed outright. "So does letting me finish a cup of coffee." Even Claire couldn't stop smiling. For perhaps the first time in years, the chairman of Blackwood International found himself outnumbered by people quietly amused at his expense. He maintained his composure. No one believed a word he had said, least of all himself. What Nicholas refused to admit, even privately, was becoming increasingly obvious. He wasn't bothered by Owen's influence in the company. He was bothered by how effortlessly Owen earned the laughter Nicholas wished he could inspire himself.
The admiration surrounding Claire lasted just long enough to become dangerous. Respect, Celeste Harrington believed, was acceptable. Attention was not, especially when that attention came directly from Nicholas Devereaux. For years, Celeste had carefully built her reputation as the indispensable executive behind Blackwood International's operational success. She attended every leadership conference, chaired every strategic committee, and never missed an opportunity to stand beside the chairman when cameras appeared. Then, almost overnight, conversations shifted. Not toward her, toward Claire. It began with whispers. Did Claire help with this project? I heard she solved the logistics crisis. Apparently the chairman always asks for her opinion, now. Each rumor felt like another crack beneath Celeste's carefully constructed image. She convinced herself there was only one explanation. Claire had manipulated the situation. Nobody became that influential by accident. One Monday morning, an anonymous post appeared on the company's internal discussion board. Funny how one public apology creates an instant career. No signature, no proof, only implication. By lunchtime, someone added another comment. Some people know exactly how to earn sympathy. Then another. Funny that she's invited to executive meetings now. Nobody mentioned Claire by name. Nobody had to. The rumors spread faster, because they remained indirect. Claire read the messages once, closed the page, returned to work. She had spent too many years solving real problems to waste time arguing with imaginary ones. Unfortunately, the gossip refused to disappear. People began lowering their voices whenever she entered a room. Conversations paused. Smiles became uncertain. Even employees who genuinely respected her seemed afraid of choosing the wrong side. Owen noticed immediately. "You've stopped eating in the cafeteria?" Claire shrugged. "It's quieter at my desk." "No." He looked at her carefully. "It's lonelier." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll survive." He wasn't convinced. Neither was Nicholas. His assistant quietly placed several printed screenshots on his desk. Anonymous comments, internal messages, rumors. Most executives would have ordered human resources to investigate. Nicholas simply asked one question. Who benefits? The answer arrived within hours. Almost every rumor could be traced back to conversations originating inside the operations division. Specifically, Vice President Celeste Harrington's leadership circle. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, he waited. The opportunity arrived during the quarterly board meeting. Every senior executive occupied a seat around the long conference table. Claire attended, only because several ongoing projects required operational updates. She sat near the end, exactly where she preferred. The meeting progressed normally, until Celeste requested permission to address organizational concerns. Nicholas nodded once. "You have the floor." Celeste stood gracefully. "I believe recent promotion practices deserve clarification." Several executives exchanged uncertain looks. She continued. "Employees have begun questioning whether recognition is based solely on measurable performance." Nobody interrupted. Some believe emotional circumstances have influenced executive decisions. Claire understood immediately. So did everyone else. Celeste smiled politely. "I simply believe transparency protects the company's integrity." The room became painfully quiet. Claire slowly closed her notebook. She had no intention of defending herself. If people believed the rumors, no speech would change their minds. Nicholas folded his hands. "An excellent suggestion." Celeste appeared encouraged. "I agree." He pressed a button on the conference table. The projection screen behind him illuminated. Rows of internal performance reports filled the display. "Since we're discussing transparency," he selected the earliest file. "Let's begin 10 years ago." The first report appeared. Emergency Distribution Recovery Lead. Recommendation, Claire Whitmore. Another file. Manufacturing. Cost Reduction Primary Process Design. Claire Whitmore. Another. Client Retention Initiative. Operational Framework. Claire Whitmore. Another. Supply Chain Recovery. Strategic Solution. Claire Whitmore. Another. 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 The reports continued, year after year, project after project, major achievement after major achievement. Claire's name appeared repeatedly, not as department head, not as vice president, but as the specialist whose recommendations had quietly rescued failing initiatives before executives presented them as completed successes. No dramatic music, no emotional speech, only documented facts. Nicholas looked around the room. These reports were archived within our own internal systems. He changed slides again. A chart appeared. It summarized nearly a decade of company performance. Beside dozens of the corporation's highest impact operational improvements appeared the same name. Claire Whitmore. Murmurs spread across the room. One executive leaned forward in disbelief. I've approved several of these projects. Another frowned. I never realized those recommendations came from operations. Owen looked toward Claire. He wasn't surprised she had done the work. He was surprised by how much. Claire herself looked almost embarrassed. I wasn't the only person involved. No, Nicholas replied calmly. You weren't. His voice remained perfectly composed. But you were consistently the person who identified the solution before anyone else. He faced the board. No promotion discussed today has been based on sympathy. Another report appeared. It has been delayed by oversight. Silence settled over the room with far greater weight than the day of the false accusation. Because this time, everyone understood their mistake. For years they had praised leadership, while overlooking the woman quietly making that leadership successful. Celeste stared at the screen. Every document had come from official company records. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to imply, nothing left to distort. Without raising his voice once, Nicholas had dismantled months of rumors using only the truth. Claire had never climbed the corporate ladder through favoritism. If anything, she had spent years carrying it while someone else accepted the applause.
The board meeting changed everything. It also changed nothing. By the following week, every employee at Blackwood International knew the truth. Claire Whitmore had never manipulated anyone. She had spent years quietly rescuing projects that kept the corporation running. People apologized, some sincerely, others because they feared looking foolish after Nicholas had revealed the internal reports. Claire accepted every apology with the same gentle smile. It's all right. The words were genuine. Forgiveness had never been difficult for her. Trust was another matter. Something inside her had shifted. For years, she had believed good work would eventually speak for itself. Now she understood something far less comforting. Good work often whispered. Politics shouted. The company suddenly wanted to celebrate her. Human Resources proposed a feature article highlighting outstanding employees. Marketing suggested filming an interview. Several executives invited her to leadership dinners they had never considered before. Claire declined every invitation. She wasn't angry. She was simply tired. One evening, she remained alone in the operations department, long after most lights in the building had gone dark. Her desk looked exactly as it always had. Sticky notes, color-coded folders, half-finished spreadsheets. A small cactus that somehow survived despite receiving very little attention. Claire smiled faintly. I understand how you feel. A quiet voice answered from the doorway. So does the cactus. She looked up. Owen stood there holding 2 paper cups of coffee. I thought you might still be here. You guessed correctly. He handed her one. You've been staying late every night. So have you. I have an excuse. So do I. He pulled out a chair. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Owen asked the question everyone else had avoided. Are you happy? Claire stared into her coffee. I thought I would be. And now, she considered the answer carefully. I finally received recognition. She smiled sadly. It just arrived attached to the worst week of my career. Owen nodded. I was afraid you'd say that. She looked around the nearly empty office. Every hallway reminds someone about the accusation. People respect you now. They do. But they don't see Claire. They see the woman the chairman apologized to. Her voice remained calm. I don't want to spend the next 10 years proving I'm more than one embarrassing afternoon. Owen didn't argue. Because he understood. A week later, Claire requested a private meeting with Nicholas. She entered his office, carrying a single envelope. He recognized it immediately. A resignation letter. He did not open it. Instead, he looked directly at her. May I ask why? Claire answered honestly. I love this company. I know. That's exactly why I'm leaving. He remained silent. She continued. Departments are choosing sides. Some people think I'm receiving special treatment. Others think you should have promoted me years ago. She shook her head. I've become the subject of conversations that have nothing to do with the work. I don't want to be the reason people stop trusting one another. Nicholas listened without interruption. You believe leaving will solve that. I believe staying won't. The room became very quiet. Finally, he spoke. I could refuse your resignation. You could. I won't. Claire looked genuinely surprised. He stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. You've spent years solving problems for this company. He turned back. I won't create another one by forcing you to remain. There was no dramatic plea. No emotional confession. Only respect. He accepted the envelope. I hope you find what you're looking for. Claire smiled. I hope so too. 3 weeks later, she joined Ashcroft Dynamics, one of Blackwood International's largest competitors. Her new title was simple: Director of Operational Excellence. No elaborate ceremony. No public announcement. Just an office where people expected her ideas before they expected miracles. Within the first month, warehouse efficiency improved dramatically. Within the second, project delays fell by nearly 30%. By the third, something far more troubling happened. Long-term clients who had worked with Claire for years quietly began transferring portions of their business to Ashcroft. Not because she asked them to. Because she answered their calls, remembered their names, solved their problems. One after another, contracts followed relationships. During an executive review meeting, Nicholas examined the latest client reports. At first, he assumed the numbers reflected ordinary market competition. Then, he noticed a pattern. The departing clients all shared one detail. Every one of them had spent years working with Claire behind the scenes. They had trusted the corporation because they trusted the person solving its problems. He closed the report slowly. The realization landed with uncomfortable clarity. He had never truly feared losing an operations specialist. He had feared losing the quiet center of the company without realizing she had become its center at all. Buildings remained. Departments remained. Executives remained. Yet something essential had disappeared the day Claire walked out carrying one cardboard box and a small cactus. For the first time in many years, Blackwood International still looked exactly the same. It simply didn't feel the same anymore. 3 months after Claire left Blackwood International, Nicholas stopped pretending the numbers would correct themselves. Every weekly report told the same story. Projects still finished. Revenue remained strong. Executives continued presenting polished slides. Yet the company had become strangely slower. Problems that Claire once solved in a single afternoon now wandered through committees for 2 weeks. Clients requested more meetings. Department heads approved more procedures. Everyone worked harder. Very little worked better. Late one Friday evening, Nicholas closed another performance report and realized he had spent nearly an hour reading the comments clients attached to their surveys. They rarely mentioned products. They rarely mentioned prices. Instead, they wrote things like, "Claire always remembered our deadlines. She made impossible situations feel manageable. She listened before offering solutions." The reports revealed something no financial statement could measure. People had trusted Blackwood because Claire had made them feel understood. For years, Nicholas had believed the company's greatest strength was its influence. Now he understood it had been its people. More specifically, one woman who had never asked for recognition. The following Monday, Nicholas cancelled every meeting after noon. His assistant looked startled. "Should I reschedule them?" "No." "Is there somewhere you need to be?" "Yes." He picked up his car keys himself. No security detail. No executive escort. No media. His assistant hesitated. "Should I inform anyone?" Nicholas buttoned his jacket. Not this time. Claire was arranging folders inside her new office when someone knocked gently on the open door. Without looking up, she smiled. "If it's another welcome basket, I promise the candy drawer is already full." No answer came. She lifted her head. Nicholas Devereaux stood quietly in the doorway. Not in an expensive boardroom, not surrounded by assistants, simply a well-dressed man holding a small paper bag from the neighborhood bakery across the street. Claire blinked. "You came alone?" "I did." "No bodyguards?" They were disappointed. She laughed. "No executives? I wanted this conversation to belong to us." She gestured toward the visitor's chair. "You'd better sit down before my new co-workers think they're hallucinating." He did. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply honest. Claire finally nodded toward the bakery bag. "Peace offering?" "Recommendation." He placed it on her desk. "I was told their cinnamon rolls are exceptional." She peeked inside. "They are." "I conducted extensive research." "You asked the receptionist." "I did." She smiled again. The smile came naturally now. He noticed. "I'm glad to see you happy." "I am." She looked around her office. "It's different here. In a good way. In a healthier way. People came to her for advice before crises became emergencies. Her team openly credited one another. Nobody seemed interested in office politics. She still worked long hours. She simply no longer carried the invisible weight of proving she belonged. Nicholas nodded slowly. "I'm pleased." She studied him for a moment. "You didn't drive all the way here to evaluate my office?" "No." "Or recruit me?" "No." "I've already accepted that answer." Claire leaned back in her chair. "Then why are you here?" For perhaps the first time since becoming head of an empire, Nicholas chose complete honesty over careful wording. "I came to thank you." She looked genuinely puzzled. "For what?" He smiled, a quiet smile that softened the composed expression so many people found intimidating. "For teaching a man who spent his life controlling an empire." He paused. "That the most valuable person in the room isn't always sitting at the head of the table." Claire lowered her eyes for a second, visibly touched. "You figured that out on your own?" "No. I only recognized it after you were gone." Another comfortable silence settled between them. Then Claire chuckled. "So, the chairman of Blackwood International drove across the city just to say thank you. I believe that's exactly what happened. You know," she folded her arms with playful amusement, "your scheduling has improved dramatically." "I've been learning from an operations specialist." They both laughed. Outside the office window, employees hurried through another ordinary workday, completely unaware that two people were quietly closing the chapter that had begun with one humiliating mistake. Neither of them spoke about accusations, or gossip, or jealousy. Those battles had already served their purpose. Respect had become friendship. Friendship had quietly become something deeper. Neither rushed to define it. Some stories didn't begin with grand declarations. Some began with a sincere apology. Others, with a billionaire kneeling on a conference room floor to return a scattered handbag. Neither Claire nor Nicholas had imagined that one mistaken accusation would become the first page of their love story, and this time, they intended to write every chapter together.